Before you start searching for who he is, what he stands for, and whether he is the right man for you, the first question you must answer is simple but powerful: who are you? Too many people jump into relationships, into commitments, even into expectations without ever having a solid identity of their own. They get lost in trying to figure out someone else's values, someone else's vision, someone else's dreams. But when you look at their own life, it's empty, undefined, and uncertain. And the truth is this: if you don't know who you are, you will accept anything from anyone, even if it breaks you, even if it disrespects you, even if it takes away your crown. Knowing who you are is about clarity. It is about digging deep into your core, stripping away the noise of society, the demands of culture, the opinions of friends, and asking yourself, what do I believe in? What do I stand for? What do I want my life to represent? When you know this, you stop negotiating with mediocrity. You stop begging for attention. You stop trying to prove your worth to someone who doesn't even know what to do with you. You start radiating confidence, not because of who's standing next to you, but because of the foundation you've built within yourself. Think about it. A queen never walks into a room asking, will they respect me? A queen walks into a room already knowing who she is, already owning her presence, already carrying herself with authority. She doesn't shrink, she doesn't beg, she doesn't chase, she attracts. Why? Because her identity is established. If you want to be treated like royalty, you cannot build your sense of self on someone else's validation. You must establish your identity before you allow anyone else into your world. When you don't know yourself, you become vulnerable to manipulation. You allow sweet words to replace solid action. You let someone else's promises define your worth. You believe lies because you haven't built truth within yourself. And this is where so many people go wrong. They think knowing him will make them feel secure, when in reality, only knowing themselves will give them that unshakable security. When you know who you are, you can see through the games, you can recognize eyes' red flags, you can demand respect without even raising your voice, because identity is power. Knowing who you are also means defining your boundaries. A boundary is not a wall to keep people out. It is a gate to decide who has earned the right to come in. If you don't know your values, your boundaries will always be weak, and weak boundaries invite chaos. But when you know what you will and will not tolerate, when you know the standard you live by, you won't have to scream for respect. Respect will follow you automatically. Men respect women who respect themselves, and that begins with identity. Another layer of knowing who you are is understanding your purpose. Without purpose, life becomes random. You drift from one relationship to another, one experience to another, always searching for meaning in someone else's attention. But when you have purpose, you don't settle for anyone who doesn't align with it. You don't get distracted by temporary charm because you're focused on a mission bigger than yourself. Purpose creates direction, and direction creates power. Men don't follow women who are lost. They admire women who are grounded in a vision and relentless in their pursuit of it. And let's be real, knowing who you are is not about being perfect. It's about being honest. It's about looking in the mirror and embracing both your strengths and your flaws, your victories and your scars, your growth and your struggles. When you accept yourself fully, no one can use your insecurities against you. No one can make you doubt your value. No one can convince you that you're less than a queen. Because your identity is not built on their opinion, it's built on truth, on resilience, on the journey that made you who you are today. Here's the reality: men test women. They test boundaries, they test standards, they test consistency. And if you don't know who you are, you will fail every test, not because you're weak, but because you are undefined. But when you know yourself, you pass those tests without even trying. You pass them simply by standing tall, by refusing to bend your values, by walking with clarity. Men don't argue with women who are sure of themselves. They respect them. They admire them. They even fear disappointing them, because they know this woman will never lower her crown to accommodate disrespect. Identity is not something you find overnight. It's built in the gym when you train your body. It's built in the late nights when you study, hustle, and grind for your dreams. It's built in the silence when you face your fears, Confront your insecurities and choose growth instead of excuses. It's built in every sacrifice, every battle, every moment you chose discipline over comfort. That's who you are. And when you truly know that, no man, no circumstance, no opinion can shake you. Everywhere you look, people are obsessed with the question, who is he? They want to know what kind of man he is, how much he earns, how strong he stands, what his vision looks like, and whether he has the qualities to be a leader or a partner. But the mistake is this: asking who he is before you have the courage to answer who you are. Because if you are undefined, if you are unclear about your own identity, then no matter how great he might appear, you will never stand on equal ground. You will always find yourself measuring your worth through his shadow instead of your own light. Knowing who you are is the shield that protects you in a world full of illusions. Think about it. How many people have fallen for a man's words only to later realize those words had no foundation? Sweet promises, charming gestures, a crafted image. But if you don't know yourself, you fall into his story because you haven't written your own. When you are rooted in your identity, you can separate truth from performance, character from charisma, substance from appearance. The truth is, identity is not something you fake. It is something you build. It is forged in the fire of discipline, shaped by your decisions and proven by your consistency. When you know who you are, you stop chasing validation. You stop begging for recognition. You stop trying to earn respect through desperation. Instead, you carry yourself with certainty. You walk into every situation with an aura that says, I know my value, and I don't need anyone to confirm it. And that is exactly what makes men take you seriously. Think about the way the world works. People follow confidence. They are drawn to strength. They admire clarity. When you are vague about yourself, others won't treat you with respect because uncertainty is weak. But when you declare with your actions and your lifestyle exactly who you are, the respect comes naturally. A man cannot dismiss a woman who knows herself. He may try to test her, but he cannot ignore her. He may challenge her, but he cannot diminish her. Her self-knowledge creates a power that commands attention without ever raising her voice. Knowing who you are also forces you to raise your standards. When you don't know yourself, you settle for anyone who gives you a fraction of attention. You accept behavior that disrespects you because you think that's the best you can get. But when your identity is strong, your standards become unshakable. You don't chase, you attract. You don't plead, you demand by the way you carry yourself. Men respect women who refuse to lower their standards because those standards reflect identity. And respect is the foundation of every relationship worth having. This is why knowing yourself must always come before asking who he is. If you focus only on him, what he wants, what he believes, what he stands for, you lose yourself in his definition. And once you lose yourself, you give away your crown. You begin to measure your worth by how he sees you rather than how you see yourself. But when you are grounded in who you are, no man can strip you of your value. He can recognize it, he can respect it, he can align with it, but he cannot define it. Let's take it deeper. Knowing yourself is not just about personality or preferences. It's about principles. What principles define your life? What values are non-negotiable to you? Integrity, discipline, faith, resilience. Whatever they are, these principles must be the bedrock of your identity. When you know them, you live them. And when you live them, you attract people who align with them. If you don't know them, you'll compromise them the moment pressure comes. And once you compromise your principles, you weaken your power. Self-knowledge also gives you direction. Too many people drift through life with no sense of where they are going. They attach themselves to men who look like they have vision, hoping to find meaning through someone else's journey. But this is dangerous, because if you don't know your direction, you will follow blindly, and you may end up lost in a place that was never meant for you. When you know who you are, you also know where you are going. And when a man enters your life, you don't need him to give you a map, you already have one. If he fits the journey, he stays. If he doesn't, he leaves. That is the power of knowing yourself first. Another layer is confidence in your identity, even when you stand alone. The real test of self-knowledge is not how loud you can declare who you are in front of people, but how steady you remain when no one else is around. Do you still stand by your values? Do you still walk in discipline? Do you still respect yourself when the world is not watching? Because if your identity crumbles in silence, it is not yet solid. Men respect women who are the same in private as they are in public, because that consistency proves authenticity. And here's the truth. The more you know yourself, the less you will be deceived. Manipulation has no power over a woman who knows her value. Empty promises have no hold on her. Lies cannot blind her, because she has clarity, and clarity is vision. She sees through the masks, through the performances, through the games. And that vision comes from identity. Every woman desires a man who is strong, disciplined, respectful, and capable of leading with vision. But before you even ask if he is strong, the real question is this: are you strong? Before you ask if he is disciplined, you must ask yourself, am I disciplined? Before you demand respect, the mirror must reflect back the truth. Do I respect myself? Because the truth is simple. Your ability to identify greatness in someone else depends entirely on how deeply you know yourself. When you don't know who you are, you end up projecting your emptiness onto the men you meet. You look at him and say, I hope he defines me. I hope he completes me. I hope he gives me meaning. But that is weakness. A queen is never completed by anyone. She is already whole. And when you are whole, you don't ask for completion. You ask for alignment. You don't beg for recognition. You expect partnership. The difference is massive. And it comes down to knowing your own identity before you seek to understand his. Self-awareness is the filter through which you evaluate every man. Without it, you cannot see clearly. You end up mistaking confidence for arrogance, charm for integrity, or possession for love. But when you are rooted in your own identity, you see people for who they truly are, not who you wish they were. You no longer fall for empty promises because you are not desperate to be filled. Instead, you stand firm and measure a man not by his words but by his consistency, not by his appearance but by his discipline, not by his intentions but by his actions. Knowing who you are also gives you leverage in relationships. Power is not in manipulation, power is in clarity. When you have clarity about yourself, your vision, your standards, your values, you cannot be swayed by temporary emotions. You won't compromise long-term goals for short-term validation. Men respect this because it shows control, and control is strength. A woman who cannot be easily shaken is a woman men take seriously because they know she cannot be played, fooled, or led astray. The mistake too many women make is trying to build identity after they enter a relationship. They think, once I find the right man, I will figure myself out. Once I'm loved, I will feel valuable. Once I'm chosen, I will know my worth. But that is backwards. If you do not already know who you are, you will never know whether he is right for you, because your decision will be clouded by neediness. You will mistake attention for love, and you will lower your standards just to avoid being alone. Identity must come first, because without it, every choice you make about him will be based on insecurity. Knowing who you are also means refusing to be defined by roles. Too often, women define themselves only as daughters, girlfriends, wives, or mothers, forgetting that their identity is larger than any single role. Yes, those roles may be important, but they are not the entirety of who you are. When you only define yourself through him, his approval, his name, his validation, you weaken your power. But when you establish yourself as a complete individual first, you add strength to every role you take on. Men respect women who bring value, not women who lose themselves in the process of attaching to someone else. Another dimension of self-knowledge is emotional awareness. You must know your strengths, but you must also know your weaknesses. If you don't know your triggers, your fears, and your insecurities, you hand over the weapon to anyone who wants to use them against you. But when you are honest with yourself, when you confront your emotions and take control of them, you become unshakable. A woman who knows how to master her emotions is a woman who cannot be manipulated. And men respect emotional strength because it creates stability. Identity also determines attraction. The energy you project is the energy you attract. If you are insecure, lost, and desperate, you will attract men who feed on those weaknesses. But if you know yourself If you walk with purpose, clarity, and discipline, you will attract men who match that level. This is not magic, it is alignment. People are drawn to those on their frequency. If you want a strong man, be strong. If you want a disciplined man, live disciplined. If you want a man who respects you, show respect to yourself first. And don't forget, knowing who you are means knowing what you want. Too many people enter relationships blind, hoping the other person will reveal the path. But when you are clear about your goals, your dreams, and your vision, you know exactly the kind of man who fits into that future. Without clarity, you end up forcing relationships with men who were never meant to walk with you. With clarity, you can say no to what doesn't serve you and yes only to what aligns with your path. Men respect women who know what they want because it shows maturity, focus, and strength. Finally, knowing who you are creates freedom. You are no longer chained to desperation, no longer trapped by fear of being alone, no longer enslaved by the need to be chosen. You stand free because you chose yourself first. And when you choose yourself, you give others no option but to either rise to your standard or step aside. This is the essence of power, knowing yourself so completely that no man can define you, no relationship can consume you, and no circumstance can shake you. There is a dangerous pattern in today's world. People want to skip the hard work of self-discovery and jump straight into evaluating someone else. They want to dissect his values, his vision, his goals, his behavior, his character. But before you can ever analyze him, you must analyze yourself. Before you can test his strength, you must test your own. Before you can ask who he is, you must answer the deeper question of who you are, because if that question remains unanswered, every decision you make about him will be built on shaky ground. Knowing who you are is about building an inner foundation so strong that no outside influence can shake it. Without that foundation, you are vulnerable. Vulnerable to flattery, vulnerable to manipulation, vulnerable to mistaking attention for affection and charm for character. But when you have clarity in your identity, you are immovable. You no longer take people at face value, you weigh them against the standard you already live by. And that standard, not your emotions, becomes the deciding factor in who you allow into your life. A woman who does not know herself will always be tempted to lose herself in a man. She will adopt his dreams as her own, his values as her truth, and his identity as her identity. That is dangerous because it strips her of her power. But when you know who you are, you bring strength into the relationship. You don't enter as an empty vessel waiting to be filled. You enter as a complete individual ready to build alongside someone else. Men respect women who know themselves because those women cannot be swallowed up by someone else's shadow. They shine their own light, and that light demands recognition. Self-knowledge creates balance. If you are grounded in your identity, you can evaluate a man objectively. You won't overvalue superficial things, looks, status, money, because you know those don't define you and they shouldn't define him. You will look deeper, asking questions like, does he align with my values? Does his vision complement mine? Does his discipline match the standard I live by? Without knowing yourself, you don't even know what to look for in him. But with identity, you filter through the distractions and focus on what truly matters. This is why personal development must come before relationship development. You must work on yourself, your discipline, your mindset, your growth, before you worry about what he brings to the table. Too many people want to skip the grind of self-improvement and rush into connection. But if you don't know your worth, you will accept less than you deserve. If you don't know your values, you will compromise too easily. If you don't know your mission, you will get pulled into his mission even if it's going in the wrong direction. Knowing yourself is the shield that protects you from losing your way. Let's talk about respect. Respect does not begin with him, it begins with you. Men don't respect women who don't respect themselves. If you accept lies, mistreatment, and neglect, you teach him that you are willing to tolerate it. But if you stand firm in your boundaries, if you walk with clarity, if you carry yourself as someone who knows her value, he has no choice but to rise to your standard. Respect flows naturally when identity is solid. You don't have to scream for it. You don't have to beg for it. You command it silently through the way you live. And here is the truth: the knowing yourself is not arrogance. It is confidence rooted in reality. Arrogance is pretending to be something you are not. Confidence is living in alignment with who you truly are. When you know yourself, you no longer need validation to feel secure. You no longer crumble when someone doubts you. You no longer chase attention because you already carry authority. This type of confidence is magnetic. It pulls people toward you, not because you are loud, but because you are authentic. Identity also determines compatibility. If you don't know who you are, you can't know who fits you. You might connect with a man emotionally, but clash with him spiritually. You might admire his ambition, but find out later that his values oppose your own. But when you know yourself, you know exactly what kind of partner aligns with your path. You don't waste time forcing something that isn't meant to be. You recognize quickly who belongs in your life and who doesn't, saving yourself from unnecessary pain. Knowing yourself also demands that you confront your flaws. Too many people think identity is only about celebrating strengths, but it's also about acknowledging weaknesses. If you don't face your insecurities, they will control you. If you don't admit your struggles, they will define you. But when you confront them honestly, you strip them of their power. A woman who knows both her strengths and weaknesses is unstoppable because no one can use her flaws against her. Men respect this honesty because it shows maturity and self-awareness. Finally, knowing who you are gives you independence. Independence does not mean isolation. It means you are whole by yourself. You don't cling to him because you fear being alone. You don't settle for disrespect because you think you cannot survive without him. You don't lose yourself in the process of loving someone else. You stand on your own 2 feet with your own vision, your own discipline, and your own power. From that position, you don't need to ask who he is out of desperation. You ask it out of clarity because you already know that only a man who matches your strength and respects your identity can stand beside you. Before you ask who he is, what his goals are, how disciplined he is, whether he has vision or if he can provide leadership, you must turn the mirror back to yourself and ask the most fundamental question: do I know who I am? Because if your identity is unclear, then every answer you receive about him will be filtered through insecurity. If you do not know yourself, you will project fantasies onto him, you will overlook red flags, and you will compromise your standards just to hold on to someone who may not even deserve your time. Knowing who you are is about identity, but identity is not built on surface-level labels. It is not just your career, your appearance, or your possessions. Those things may change, and when they change, your sense of self will crumble if that is all you stand on. True identity is rooted in your values, your principles, and your unshakable truth. It is about understanding what you will never compromise on, no matter how attractive the temptation may be. When you know these things, no man can come into your life and redefine you according to his convenience. Self-knowledge brings clarity. If you don't know yourself, you will constantly look to him for direction. You will rely on his vision because you don't have one of your own. You will lean on his confidence because yours is weak. You will depend on his validation because you haven't built the ability to validate yourself. But when you have clarity in your own identity, you don't need him to define your path. You already have a mission. He does not complete you. He complements you. He does not give you strength. He joins you in strength. This is the difference between living from a place of wholeness versus living from a place of emptiness. Knowing who you are also creates authority. Authority is not about domination or control, it is about presence. When a woman knows herself, her presence changes the atmosphere. She doesn't need to demand respect because respect follows her naturally. She doesn't need to explain her worth because her actions prove it. She doesn't need to convince anyone of her value because her discipline and confidence make it undeniable. Men notice this immediately. They can tell when a woman carries herself with identity, and they treat her differently because she has set a tone that cannot be ignored. This identity must extend to every area of life. Physically, do you respect your body by taking care of it? Mentally, do you strengthen your thoughts by feeding them discipline and focus instead of doubt? Spiritually, Do you anchor yourself in a truth that cannot be shaken? Financially, do you stand with independence instead of dependency? A woman who knows herself in every area cannot be swayed by surface-level attraction. She evaluates him not through desperation, but through strength. She doesn't ask, "Can he save me?" She asks, "Does he align with me?" The trap too many people fall into is believing that knowing him first will solve everything. They think, if I can just figure out what kind of man he is, then I will feel secure. But security does not come from him, it comes from you. If you are insecure within yourself, even the best man in the world cannot fix it. You will always question him, always doubt him, always feel incomplete because the hole was never his to fill. Only you can do that by knowing yourself and standing firm in your identity before he even enters the picture. Self-knowledge also determines the type of energy you attract. If you live in confusion, you will attract confusion. If you live with no boundaries, you will attract men who disrespect boundaries. If you live with low standards, you will attract men who take advantage of those low standards. But when you know yourself, when you establish discipline, raise your standards, and refuse to compromise, suddenly the wrong men stop approaching and the right men step forward. This is not coincidence, it is alignment. The energy you carry is the energy you invite. Another important aspect of knowing yourself is emotional discipline. If you are easily swayed by emotions, you will make decisions you regret. A man might make you feel special in a moment, and because you lack identity, you mistake that feeling for a foundation. But when you know yourself, you control your emotions instead of letting them control you. You can feel deeply, but you also think clearly. You can love passionately, but you also evaluate wisely. Men respect women who are not ruled by fleeting emotions because they know those women are steady, reliable, and strong. Finally, knowing who you are gives you freedom. Freedom from the fear of being alone, freedom from the pressure to conform, freedom from the desperation to be chosen. When you are free, you can stand in any room with confidence, whether you are single or in a relationship, whether you are admired or overlooked. You are not defined by who stands beside you. You are defined by who you have chosen to become. And from that place of freedom, you no longer ask who he is with desperation. You ask it with discernment because you already know that any man who cannot honor your identity has no place in your life.